On the 24th of June, 1812, Napoleon's grand army of 420,000 men crossed the Niemen River into Russia. It was to be a cakewalk. It became a disaster instead. They came to defeat the Russian army, to force Russia's surrender. Napoleon wanted a land route to conquer India. The British ruled the seas. With it, they owned India. Napoleon wanted India for the French. For this, he wanted to compel Tsar Alexander I, who was legally an ally of France, to give up his control of Russia to him. After Napoleon had defeated the Russian army in 1807 in the Battle of Friedland, France and Russia had signed the treaties of Tilsit that had made the two countries allies. The treaty prohibited Russia from doing business with Britain, which Russia ignored. The breach enabled the objective for regime change to be forced. The official excuse for the invasion, of course, in typical empire fashion, was that the invasion of Russia was necessary to liberate Poland from the Russian threat. Militarily, the invasion was a cakewalk. Russia had no military might to speak of with which to counter the civilized forces of the French Empire. It was a cakewalk also because the Russians had refused to fight. They would have been slaughtered. Instead, they retreated. Their refusal became their liberation. The war was decided by logistics, not heroics. Napoleon lost the war by the lack of logistics. The massive invasion encountered a land of poverty, with squalid living conditions and teeming with lies. Lies are carriers of the typhoid. Napoleon lacked the logistics to counter this force. During the first months of the invasion, the loss of men from disease and desertion had reduced Napoleon's army to half, so that his advisors urged Napoleon to withdraw. He agreed, but 2 days later he changed his mind. With his eyes set on Moscow, he proclaimed, "Victory will justify and save us." An alert person would have seen the writing on the wall. Napoleon was defeated by the system of empire, a system of civility that disregards the human dimension and the common aim of all mankind. For empire, the goal is stealing. Wars are forced to open the doors to stealing. The Russians gave him a burned-out landscape that contained no food, lacked water, and offered no fodder for the horses either. Blinded by his own ideology, the ideology of empire, Napoleon walked into a trap that he could not see, nor his advisers could see, who were similarly blinded. The Russians won the war by simply drawing Napoleon deep into the country while disrupting the supply trails. The Russian defenders literally watched the Grand Army to defeat itself with diseases and hunger. They literally watched it to starve itself to death. The transportation infrastructure didn't exist to support the supply system for a large army. Roads frequently became rivers of mud. The long train of heavy wagons forced deep spurs in the mud. Wagons sank to their axles into the road. And on days when the sun broke through, the mud became hard. The spurs became canyons. The horses broke their legs in them. At the end of the first week, the Grand Army had left behind, along the road, a trail of 10,000 dead horses. Some say that it was mostly the Russian winter, with its minus 30 to 40 degrees temperature and high winds, that had defeated Napoleon. This is not true. By the time Napoleon had taken Moscow, he had fewer than 100,000 men left, out of the 680,000 that he had brought into Russia. And for what? His victory had been denied. He had conquered an empty and undefended city that was set ablaze within days under his very nose, to deny him the facilities of civilization. Most likely, it wasn't the burning of Moscow that eventually forced his retreat. The collapsing logistics and the rising pandemics may have impelled that. Napoleon had received 15,000 reinforcements to bolster his position in Moscow. Of these, 10,000 died of diseases within the destroyed city. The cold may have killed half of the soldiers that eventually evacuated Moscow. Without protective logistics, it doesn't matter whether the cold drops to minus 20 or minus 40 degrees. The Grand Army had come in summer clothing. The worst fate was for a man to fall asleep in the icy winds and in 30 below weather with driving snow. Those who would surrender to sleep never woke up. No one had the strength left by then to help others along. The road home became littered with their frozen corpses. Some say that 1,000 to 4,000 soldiers had made it back home as able men, of the 100,000 who had retreated from Moscow. The rest fell by the wayside. This means that almost no one had survived the 6-month-long epic of dying of the 680,000 men who had waged war on Russia. Tchaikovsky's great 1812 overture, commissioned to celebrate Russia's victory, ends with the boom of cannon fire incorporated into the heroic-style music. But this isn't how the war was won. Napoleon was not defeated by heroics, but by a dead poet and the quiet rustle of lies, the growls of empty stomachs, and the freezing of soldiers who fell asleep standing. Nevertheless, the Russian victory was not a passive victory. It was an active victory right from the start that was designed to protect the most precious asset that a nation has, which is its people. The capital city was sacrificed to protect the most precious. A city can be rebuilt when the nation is preserved, was the heart of the message of the poet. The cannon fire of the celebration symphony likely does not represent the explosions of war, but the exploding fire of humanist ideals, ideals of truth that end wars. Mostly, however, Napoleon was defeated by the ideology of empire itself that had inspired the invasion of Russia in the first place. Napoleon was defeated by his blindness that was symbolized by the crown that he wore. He could not see the human dimension that is blocked by the barrier of gold. Blind as he was, he saw a military victory within reach. Had he read the writing of Friedrich Schiller, the German poet of freedom, he would have chosen a different type of victory, the victory of economic development in cooperation with Russia, instead of the victory of the grave that buried his finest men and his opportunity to make his name great and honorable. Napoleon had denied himself and the people of Western Europe the only possible type of real victory that is possible, built on advancing the most precious that a society has, which is the creative and productive capacity of the human being. The Russian leadership chose this type of victory, a victory that is inherently possible by the principle of our humanity. Ultimately, victory is not possible on the side of empire, which is itself but a fading dream. The people who strode with Napoleon all ended up dead, defeated by the myth of empire as the rising sun. You are on the bridge. The whole of humanity is on the bridge. Humanity follows the flag of empire, oblivious of the ice age before it, which will be its doom, because the infrastructures are presently not being built that support human living in an ice age world. Empire is deadly. It is a belief in something that is not real. Empire parades itself to be a sun, a star of glory that shines by its own power and merit. It pretends to symbolize grandeur, riches, and civility, while unseen at its core, it is devoid of humanity. Hiding behind its gilded facade, empire is a force directed against humanity, by which empire dooms itself as the only declared enemy that humanity has. Its real name is war. All wars are caused by empire, for empire, and on behalf of empire, or against competing empires. Empire and war is one. Empire is a force deployed to plunder, subdue, and to steal, instead of to create, to produce, and to build. By this, empire is doomed. Empire is also the enemy of science, and the only inherent enemy that science has and ever will have. This may be the reason why in modern time the star for the Earth, our astrophysical sun, is being paraded on posters with a false face. It is portrayed with a face of which nothing is actually real, but which reflects the nature of empire through and through. It would be surprising if this wasn't so, because everything that empire creates is a paradox unto itself. But there is a light at the end of the tunnel, a light as symbolized by the cannon fire of the 1812 overture, that appears to celebrate the explosion of truth over what would suppress it. The Empire Sun poster is strong across the landscape of science. It parades the sun in the form of a sphere of hydrogen gas that is itself powered by nuclear fusion reactions occurring at its core. This sun is deemed to exist disconnected from the universe, self-made, as its own master, burning its own fuel, subject to nothing, invariable, unchanging, and forever constant in its operation. Isn't this also what empire says about itself, in essence? It is not surprising in this context that empire has devised a model for the sun that mirrors its own image, a kind of astrophysical model that reflects the nature of empire. The model that resulted isn't likely a conspiracy, it is most likely honestly derived. In fact, it would be surprising if the empire-created image of the sun did not reflect in principle the characteristics of the system of empire. Empire paints the world with the colors of its ideology. Every great artist paints the image of the world as it appears in the artist's mind. In this context, the paintings of Leonardo da Vinci and Pablo Picasso portray different views of the same object, seen through different eyes, shaped by different ideals. It would be surprising if this differentiation in characteristics didn't exist. It applies to science likewise. The masters of empire who control the sciences, just as they control nations subversively, are invariably steeped in the ideology of empire that they serve. As a consequence, the empire-created poster of the sun and its operation bears the reflected image of the ideology of empire. It serves a specific objective instead of the truth. That this orientation has consequences, of course, sometimes extreme consequences. Some of these are intentional. Under the Empire Sun model, and I mean empire in the generic sense as a system of thinking that stands poised in the modern world to repeat the Napoleonic blunder of 1812, though on a vastly more gigantic scale this time around. Humanity is enticed into a type of dreaming in which the next ice age is denied, even while it stands steadily poised and as close as the 2050s. The induced dreaming that the ice age is neither real nor near is dangerous, because the sleep state blocks all efforts for building the necessary infrastructures in preparing for the coming conditions. Living oblivious of the truth under the flag of the Empire Sun, The greatest danger to society's existence, as the Ice Age looms before us, is being swept under the rug. It was the same for the soldiers who were crossing the river Niemen into Russia. They were oblivious of the doom they were led into under the banner of empire that projects a myth of glory that is fundamentally a lie. Oblivious in the same sense, humanity is poised to re-experience the doom of this folly in the near future, in a world without food, scorched landscapes, and ever more unbearable drought and cold. That this fate is near is evident by the fact that the infrastructures are not being built that enable agriculture and human living to continue in an Ice Age environment. We have a chance today, in our time, to avoid this doom, a chance that the soldiers on the bridge did not have. We have a chance today to discern the real sun. The real sun is different from the empire sun in every respect. The real sun is vulnerable, variable, a sphere of plasma that is largely empty inside and is energized externally by principles that render it as an integral element of the anti-entropic universe. On its surface, the largely empty sun is teeming with energetic electric interactions. This turbulency of electric currents flowing in plasma is not of the sun's own creating. It merely facilitates it as a catalyst for it. Also, wherever electric movements happen, magnetic phenomena follow. All magnetic phenomena are electric effects. They are the effect of electric particles in motion. The sun is covered with them, even while it is empty inside. But what proves the seeming paradox? What proves that our mighty sun is empty inside, so that what we see of it is but skin deep? The proof of the seeming paradox is located in one of the sun's smallest features that all by itself closes the door on the empire sun model. This feature is the sunspot. The sunspot is a dark spot on the face of the sun. It results when a hole is ripped into the shiny surface of the sun. Whether the sunspots are small or large, or many or few, they all share one common characteristic. Their umbra are dark, as if nothing exists below the shiny surface. No matter how closely we look and how much we expand the view, we always look into a void when we look through the umbra of a sunspot. Paradoxically, what we behold in the void is a key feature of the very existence of the universe. If one was given the task to design the perfect universe, created out of nothing but energy and principles, one would end up with the kind of design that we actually have before us. Throughout the universe, 99.999% of all the mass exists in the form of plasma. Plasma is the term for the basic building blocks of the universe, termed protons and electrons, existing in unbound form. The electrons and protons themselves are recognized to be constructs of quarks, of up quarks and down quarks, and so on. Quarks are understood as but moving points of energy. This means that all plasma and all atoms in the universe are derived from them. And the quarks themselves are but explicate features of the implicate order of the energy background of cosmic space. That's how the great theoretical physicist David Bohm had perceived the universe, whom Einstein once referred to as his successor. The specific arrangement of the quarks are recognized to give the electrons and protons their electric potential, positive for the proton and negative for the electron. By the resulting electric potential, the unlike plasma particles, by their complementary nature, attract one another with the electric force of the universe. With the same force, particles of equal charge repel one another, which creates more room around them. However, the universe doesn't allow the complementary attraction to go so far that the attracting particles latch onto each other. At very close distances, a strong nuclear force from within the combination repels the two apart. Without that, we wouldn't have a dynamic universe. After the electrons bounce away, they are promptly attracted again by the electric force. The end result is that the electrons in plasma, which are 2,000 times smaller and lighter than the protons are drawn into an endless dynamic dance of attraction and repulsion around the protons. On this basis, plasma is bound up into atoms that subsequently form the planets and everything in them. When plasma exists in unbound form in dense concentrations, the free dancing of the electrons forms an electric barrier between the free protons. The barrier inhibits the protons repelling one another. Paradoxically, this insignificant seeming feature has a world-shaping effect. The result is that extremely dense concentrations of mass can be forged that way, with a greater density than atomic packages can have, by the electrons shielding the protons against their repelling force. The brown dwarf star is an example. Brown dwarf stars are typically of the size of Jupiter. However, they can contain up to 75 times as much mass as Jupiter does. This makes them the densest objects that we know of, with an up to 15 times greater density than the Earth. However, in extremely large concentrations of plasma, gravity does begin to play a role. With the protons being nearly 2,000 times heavier than the electrons, the lighter electrons tend to migrate to the surface, like marshmallows do on milk. The migration of the electrons away from the center of gravity enables the needed high electron density on the surface of the Sun that is required for a Sun to function. It also enables the protons in the core of the Sun to see each other more strongly and thereby repel each other more strongly, whereby a very large plasma sphere results that has the lowest mass density at its core and the highest density at its surface, where the greatest electron density exists. This makes the resulting Sun an extremely active electric catalyst. The principle of electron migration is evidently one of the most critical features of the universe, because it enables extremely large stars to exist with an extremely low overall mass density. The resulting inverse ratio enables a sun to have the kind of extremely large surface area that would otherwise not be possible. A sun must have a large surface area in order to be able to radiate large volumes of energy. The principle defines the apparent paradox of our sun being an extremely radiant star and at the same time being an almost empty star. A sphere of atomic gas, in contrast, lacks the electric features of plasma. Atoms are electrically neutral structures. They have no external electric effects. They have their constituent plasma particles tightly bound up into electrically balanced, electrically neutral units. For this reason, plasma in the form of atoms can be packed together more densely. This means that a sphere of atomic elements, where gravity is the dominant force, always has its greatest mass density at its core, like that of a planet, or that of a gas planet where the gas is compressed by gravitational attraction. Such a planet has the least mass density at its surface. Paradoxically, the resulting density gradient renders a gas sphere unsuitable for being a sun. It actually renders the Empire Sun physically impossible. A gas sphere is limited in size by the maximum possible gas compression, without the inner atoms being crushed. This limit is overruled in the magical land of the electron degeneracy theory. Outside the land of magic, the compression limit renders a hydrogen gas sphere too small to ever be a sun. If our sun was a gas sphere of equal mass, it would be merely a tenth the size as it is, if such a dense sphere of gas could actually exist. In comparing Jupiter with Saturn, Jupiter, which has double the volume of Saturn, also has double the mass density. The greater mass density reflects Jupiter's stronger gravity that results in stronger gas compression. But when one compares Jupiter with the Sun, that has 1,000 times greater volume than Jupiter, its mass density would likely be 1,000 times greater. But this is not the case. The mass density of the Sun is roughly the same as that of Jupiter. How is this paradox possible outside the box of magic? The answer is that the Sun cannot be a gas sphere, but is an empty shell of plasma with nothing substantial inside of it. Its extremely lightweight is justified thereby. This is also what we see with our own eyes when we look through the umbra of the sunspot on the Sun, which reveals the Sun is dark inside. Magic would have us see dark energy that blots out light streaming through the hole in the surface. But without magic, however, we see a dark void, because there is essentially nothing there to be seen below the surface of the Sun. Indeed, why would we see anything different than what we see, with the Sun being an essentially empty sphere that is externally powered? Astrophysical measurements tell us plainly that our Sun cannot be anything else than a large empty shell of plasma, like an electrically inflated balloon. The paradox is further resolved if we consider the extremely large star Scuti, the largest star that is known. It is deemed to contain 10 times as much mass as our Sun. But this mass is dispersed in a sphere that is 1,700 times larger in diameter than our Sun, which makes it 5 billion times larger in volume. In this 5 billion times larger volume, the 10 solar masses almost disappear. As one researcher had put it, the star's mass density is so low that it is practically a vacuum. This simple fact takes us far away from the gas compression model of the Empire Sun, especially when we consider that this giant sphere of 10 solar masses, dispersed so thinly that it's almost a vacuum, is observed to be 340,000 times more luminous than our Sun. Such a giant star is not possible under the gas compression nuclear fusion Sun model. Paradoxically, it exists. We can see it, we can measure it, it is real. It exists because as a plasma sun, the giant star is not paradoxical at all, but illustrates the natural dynamics of plasma physics. It is totally possible under the plasma model for the largely empty giant star of 10 solar masses to outshine our Sun 340,000-fold. This is so because its radiated energy is not produced from within, but is produced by plasma reactions occurring across its nearly 3 million times larger surface than our Sun has. That's where the radiated energy comes from. On this basis, the numbers actually do add up. The recognition enables us to break away from the Euclidean reductionist kind of thinking, where everything is based on what one can see, where cause and effect are conceptually isolated. Of course, the universe isn't isolated from itself. This myth exists only in the box of reductionist thinking. In real terms, the opposite is true. Just as streams of sunlight flood the earth and illumine the landscape, brighten the flowers, so stars are illumined in cosmic space by plasma streams shining onto them. Scuti is immensely luminous, 9,500 light years distant. It is that because it exists as a large canvas that has plasma shining onto it, which it radiates back in the stellar colors of atoms, light, and cosmic rays. We need a university type of approach to be able to see with the mind past the reductionist mysticism, where everything is deduced from the most primitive platforms and reduced to them, where nothing else is deemed to exist. That's like a person walking through the world with its eyes closed, who is thereby effectively blinded. Inversely, with the eyes of the mind fully open, the real world comes into view with new vistas, vast opportunities, and revolutionary implications that otherwise remain unseen. I chose the name Symphony for my own university-type explorations beyond the fog of Euclidean reductionism, in reference to the star Symphony, the second largest star known. It is 1,100 times larger than our Sun and has up to 50 solar masses spread across its sphere that is 1.6 billion times larger in volume than the Sun and outshines the Sun 272,000-fold. However, Cygni is a star that no one has actually seen. It exists hidden in a dense nebula that is evidently of its own creating. Cygni can only be seen with the mind and be detected with advanced instrumentation that expands the range of our perception. The Empire Sun poster has the opposite effect. It takes the Sun out of the universe and then aims to explain how this disconnected star is able to shine. The theory poses a problem and then solves the impossible with magic and mysticism where nothing is real. The effect of this trap is that it reduces the cognitive power of humanity. Reductionist theories, for which no evidence exists, nor is possible, revert the mind backwards to more infantile states of thinking. The mind responds that way for its self-protection. What we are confronted with here is the kind of mysticism that all structures of empire are built on, such as the later Illuminatism and so on. Empire creates conflicts in the mind for which no solutions, except magical solutions, are deemed possible. The result is that the reduction process renders the mind small and impotent. The impossible Sun that is conjured up on this basis is an example of the mental emptiness that empire imposes on society, with which empire defends its illegitimate existence. On the political front, wars are achieved with the reductionist basis. On the economic front, looting and depopulation are achieved by it. On the mental front, the war effort is focused on keeping the mind small and impotent and infantile, and thereby easily dominated. Does this sound like a conspiracy? If so, it probably is. The system of empire, which has no legitimate foundation to exist, lives by the forces of conspiracies of many types. The conspiracies of war, the conspiracies for stealing, the conspiracies to destroy civilization, the conspiracies for depopulation, and the conspiracies for fostering impotence. The Empire Sun model is of the latter type of the conspiracies. It is designed for generating docile impotence. However, the infantilism in thinking that it forges is not a natural phenomenon of humanity. Consequently, society has the power to heal itself of this disease. Significant healing has indeed been achieved on many occasions in history when society roused itself to become more fully human. The real universe, of course, operates on a much higher level platform than the reductionist platform that empire imposes. On this higher level platform, everything is real and evidence for it exists everywhere. In the cosmic universe, every star is a plasma star. It interacts with interstellar plasma streams, which it attracts, which then become electromagnetically concentrated and focused onto the star by electromagnetic principles. When electrically charged particles are in motion in space, the electric movement creates a magnetic field around them. The magnetic force pinches the plasma stream into smaller cross-sections, which thereby increases the magnetic pinch effect, and so on. The plasma pinching continues until the magnetic fields tangle up, flip backwards, and thereby form a magnetic containment field, under which the pinched plasma becomes densely concentrated. The principle has been replicated in laboratory experiments, both statically by David Lapointe and dynamically, shown here in pink, produced at the Los Alamos National Laboratory in the USA under the direction of Anthony Parrott. The concentrated plasma under the confinement dome becomes subsequently focused onto a sun. In a broad sense, the magnetic pinch principle and its plasma concentration illustrates the basic functioning of a solar system. Interstellar plasma flowing towards a sun are concentrated magnetically. This inflowing process is possible because a part of the inflowing plasma is consumed by the sun. The portion that is not consumed flows on to the next star by the inverse of the process that had concentrated in the first place. David Lapointe termed these electromagnetic structures that facilitates the concentrating process the primal fields. We can see the complementary nature of the primal fields clearly evident in space, as in the case of the red square nebula shown here. We can also see it replicated in the dynamic laboratory experiments by Anson and Parrott. That the primal fields principle applies to our Sun is evident in the measurements of the Ulysses spacecraft that flew 3 orbits in a polar trajectory around the Sun. Whenever the spacecraft flew over the poles of the Sun, it encountered a void in the solar wind pressure. The voids were encountered exactly where the experimental model indicate that the plasma connection with the primal fields would be located. The void that is encountered in space by Ulysses accords also with the results of the dynamic high-energy experiments by Anthony Parrott. The effects that causes the Sun to be located at a node point in plasma streams is in part generated by the Sun itself. The cause is that the Sun, in principle, consumes plasma. In plasma, electrons and protons are free-flowing, but in the surface layer of the Sun, where the plasma concentration is extreme, plasma becomes dynamically bound together into atoms. Atoms are electrically balanced structures of plasma that by precise balancing become electrically neutral. By atoms being electrically neutral, the plasma that is bound up in the atoms effectively vanishes from the electrodynamics landscape. All the atoms of the planets in the universe are created in this manner on the surface of a sun. The synthesis of atoms that creates electrically balanced packages creates the vital link effect that enables continuous streams of plasma to flow onto a sun. The inflow can only be maintained when there is an outflow happening onto what is termed a sink. The atom synthesizing process furnishes the sink effect. The synthesized atoms, by their electric neutrality, are no longer a part of the electric plasma system. The plasma particles that created the atoms no longer exist in unbound form. They are thereby free to simply flow away with the wind, which in this case is the solar wind. The atoms that are forged on the surface of the sun serve as a catalyst that converts plasma energy into photons of light and heat that every sun or star radiates. The energy that we receive on Earth from the sun as light and heat is plasma energy converted into photons by atomic elements that are synthesized on the surface of the sun. It takes a wide-ranging assortment of different atomic elements, all acting in their own way, generating light at their own unique wavelengths, for the wide symphony of light to flow together that contains the seamless bands of color that we see in the sunlight. This perfect balance is not possible under the Empire-Sun model that renders the Sun a hydrogen gas star, but is possible to be produced by a plasma sun that contains all the natural atomic elements on its surface. Of course, the plasma sun emits not only atoms and light, it also emits solar wind and solar cosmic rays, neither of which are possible under the Empire-Sun model that has its atomic reactions occurring deep within it, under a mantle of primarily hydrogen gas, 500,000 kilometers thick, as the theory stipulates. But with the plasma sun that has its atomic reactions occurring at its surface, the emissions of solar wind and cosmic rays is inherently natural. The solar wind is comparable to a kettle letting off steam. The more energy flows into it, the more steam flows out of it. On the sun, the kettle is the fusion cell. The surface of the sun is a vast sea of granule fusion cells, each with its own primal field structure. Each surface primal field has its own magnetic confinement dome, as one would expect, that enables the final concentration of plasma for the fusing of atomic elements to become possible. However, when the plasma pressure in the corona of the sun enables a greater rate of flow than the fusion process can consume, the excess is vented at the weakest point of the confinement dome in a jet of plasma that becomes the solar wind. The excess pressure is released in concentrated form. The released plasma expands by the electric expansion and therefore accelerates itself away from the sun by the electric force in a similar manner as a bullet is propelled in a gun by the expanding fire of gunpowder. The expanding plasma becomes a solar wind that flows away from the sun. The strength of the solar wind gives us a measurable indicator of the density of the plasma surrounding the sun. Plasma is invisible. It does not emit light. However, the solar wind is measurable, even a long distance from the sun. the stronger the wind flows, the stronger is the plasmasphere surrounding the sun that drives the process. The solar wind is able to flow out through the solar corona, which is inflowing towards the sun, because in electrodynamics, electric currents flowing in opposite directions repel each other. The solar corona thereby becomes a two-way street. The solar fusion cells also emit cosmic rays, which are extremely energized protons and electrons that exceed the requirements for atomic synthesis. When they escape the fusion cells, they escape as fast-moving cosmic objects, termed cosmic rays. While most of the escaping cosmic rays from the fusion cells get trapped in the solar corona, a few do get through the barrier and shower the Earth with wide-ranging effects. Some of the effects are more amazing than we care to imagine. The science researcher Simon Schnorr had conducted a series of chemical and biological reaction experiments that were repeated continuously for days in an identical manner. One would assume that the measured rate of reactivity would be identical too in every case for the identical experiments. But that's not what happened. The measured results always varied. In one long extended series of experiments, the reaction rate had spiked every 24 hours, with the spikes themselves becoming smaller. The result makes no sense, except when one notes that the spikes occur with the periodicity of the rotation of the Earth and that the successive spikes become smaller. This is the pattern that one would expect to see when the coronal hole opens up on the surface of the sun in the direction of the Earth, through which larger volumes of cosmic rays escape and shower our planet. The volume of the escaping cosmic rays received on Earth would naturally diminish over the span of 4 days as the coronal hole slowly rotates away from the Earth with the rotation of the sun. The experiment proves positive that solar cosmic rays are real, are a measurable feature, and have a larger effect on Earth than one might expect. Cosmic rays also affect our atmosphere in almost the same manner. When cosmic rays flow through the Earth's atmosphere, their electric quality ionizes atoms on the path of their encounter, which makes them up to 100 times more attractive to water vapor. The increased attraction of the atoms increases the rate of cloud nucleation. Increased cloud nucleation makes the Earth colder, because the white surface of the clouds reflect a portion of the incoming solar energy back into space. By this process, the weakening of the solar corona causes the climate on Earth to become colder, because the weaker corona allows more cosmic rays to escape from the sun, which increases cloudiness on Earth. While the increased cloudiness that we now see ever more of is not ultimately causing an ice age to occur, which has a deeper cause, the increase in cloudiness is nevertheless a significant indicator that the sun is getting weaker. Another indicator that the sun is getting weaker is the rapidly diminishing solar wind pressure that the Ulysses satellite has measured the beginning of. The Ulysses satellite thereby measured the status of the solar system as a whole and its ongoing diminishing energy density. The numerous forms of evidence prove that the Sun is not its own master, but merely reflects, as a catalyst, the density of interstellar plasma streams. The plasma density that flows into the solar system from these very long interstellar plasma streams is in turn affected by electric resonance effects in the plasma streams, and is also affected by the general condition of the galaxy as a whole. All of these variable factors, which affect our Sun from areas deep in space, secondarily affect the climate on Earth. Our climate is thereby imposed on us from afar by the numerous factors that affect our Sun. As our galaxy is presently at its weakest state in 440 million years, our Sun within it operates in a correspondingly weak plasma environment, which is so weak that the climate on Earth gets reduced to glaciation conditions under a 70% dimmer and colder Sun for most of its time. Fortunately for us, the glaciation conditions get interrupted periodically with warm interglacial periods of 12,000 years in duration that occur in roughly 100,000-year intervals. We are presently in a warm period. The radical difference between glacial conditions and interglacial warm conditions is inherent in the characteristics of the design of the solar system. The solar system is not as simplistic as I had illustrated earlier, with a single set of primal fields concentrating the interstellar plasma streams. A number of observed resonance features indicate that our solar system operates as a structure of multiple sets of nested primal fields, with each having its own resonance characteristic. When the interstellar plasma stream is strong, the flow volume is large enough for all nested primal fields to form and operate. In such a case, the Sun operates in its high-powered mode, whereby interglacial conditions occur on Earth. Inversely, when the interstellar plasma stream is weak, and the flow volume diminishes below a threshold level for the weakest of the primal fields to form, the plasma density around the Sun becomes radically reduced. When one of the sets of primal fields no longer form, the plasma stream flows around the Sun in a less focused manner. Under this condition, the Sun enters its low-powered state. At the low-powered state, the surface temperature of the Sun drops down from the present 5,800 degrees Kelvin to possibly 4,000 degrees. At this point, the glaciation period begins on Earth. The transition may happen in a very short period of time, possibly in the space of weeks or months. The global temperature will follow the diminishing Sun in rapid succession. The Ice Age phenomenon for a plasma Sun is as simple as that. For us on Earth, the difference will be felt like a shock. If one projects forward what ice core records tell us about the previous Ice Age startup, the consequences of this shock will be immense. They promise to be so immense that all areas outside the tropics will become rapidly uninhabitable, and the agricultures become immediately disabled thereby. The timing of the Ice Age startup becomes critical for humanity because the shock can be avoided. We have the power to prepare ourselves for the Ice Age consequences before they come upon us by relocating our living and our agricultures into the tropics. Because there is little suitable land available in the tropics, nearly all of the new infrastructures and new cities will need to be located afloat across the equatorial seas, between the hurricane bands. This way we can live securely and richly, no matter what the next glaciation period will bring with it. We need to have this ready before the need becomes critical. The exact timing becomes important for this reason, nor is the timing hard to figure out. The writing is on the wall and is written in huge letters with the 2050s as the potential time frame. The ice core records tell us that our world has been getting progressively colder for the last 3,000 years, with some major warming spikes along the way that are likewise getting smaller. The evidence that pins these fluctuations onto the sun has recently been measured in carbon-14 ratios that stand as a proxy for solar activity. The plasma fusion reactions on the surface of the sun that synthesize atomic elements, which energized give us the sunlight, also produce solar cosmic rays that are single events of plasma particles escaping the reaction chambers in unbound form. The escaping cosmic rays impact the Earth's atmosphere and cause numerous types of reactions. One of these reactions transmutes nitrogen atoms into the radioactive carbon-14 isotope that can be measured. The measurements of their ratio in historic samples becomes a measurable ratio that reflects the intensity of solar activity. When the interstellar plasma is dense, the plasmasphere around the Sun is dense likewise, which traps most of the solar cosmic ray events. This means that fewer cosmic ray collisions occur in the Earth's atmosphere, which produces lower ratios of carbon-14. Inversely, when the interstellar plasma is weak, the solar corona is weak likewise, which enables more cosmic rays to escape and larger carbon-14 ratios to be generated. The changing ratios closely reflect the changing climate on Earth. When one plots these ratios inversely, the resulting trend matches the known historic climate trends. The plotted values tell us that the Earth has been in a solar-cast cooling trend for 800 years till the end of the Little Ice Age, after which the Sun recovered sharply until the end of the 1990s. The interruption of the downslope in the early 1700s that recovered the Sun and gave us almost 300 years of solar-cast global warming was evidently caused by one of the long-term resonance effects that have occurred during the previous glaciation periods in intervals of 1470 years, termed the Dansgaard-Oeschger oscillations. The climate spikes of the three warming periods that occurred during the last 3,500 years may have been related effects. But no matter what had caused the upramping of the Sun in the 1700s, the effect of these 1,000-year-plus events is over. The load of the last one had been spent. The solar activity is collapsing again. The rate of the collapse has been measured by the Ulysses spacecraft in terms of diminishing solar wind pressure at a rate of 30% in 10 years. In cosmic terms, this steep rate of decline is akin to a free-fall collapse. The effects of this steep collapse are visible everywhere. With the solar cosmic ray flux sharply increasing under the weakening sun, we see cloudiness increasing on Earth at an ever faster rate. Cosmic ray flux has an ionizing effect on the atmosphere, which enhances cloud nucleation up to 100-fold. The resulting increased cloudiness reflects more of the incoming sunlight and solar energy back into space, which becomes lost to us and makes the Earth colder. Increased cloud nucleation and its faster rain out causes increased flooding and also increased droughts by reducing the water transport distance in the clouds. We see all of these effects now occurring ever more. The rate of solar collapse that the Ulysses spacecraft saw only the beginning of still continues. The measured rate of collapse promises the end of the sunspot cycles in the 2020s and the end of the solar wind in the 2030s, after which the solar surface temperature will begin to diminish. Along this path, the threshold becomes crossed when the innermost primal fields can no longer be maintained and the full ice age begins. The event could happen in the 2040s and onward to the 2050s. However, we should also be extremely worried from the 2030s on, because when the solar wind diminishes to zero, the sun loses one of its mechanisms for purging the fusion cells of their synthesized products. Without the solar wind, the fusion cells tend to clog up, which diminishes the fusion process further. The clogging up may radically accelerate the collapse process towards the Ice Age startup phase shift. The uncertainty in timing makes the rapid building of the necessary infrastructures in preparation for the coming Ice Age phase shift ever more urgent. We have laboratory-developed proof that when a fusion cell is clogged up with its own fusion product, the fusion reaction cannot be long maintained. The longest duration fusion reaction lasted 1 second, a kind of world record. This has been achieved with the largest European experimental reactor. It clogged itself up after 1 second, by which the reaction stops. Our sun may get into this type of critical situation in the 2030s, when the solar wind dies down to zero. The phase shift to the sun's lower energy state, with which the Ice Age begins anew, might be triggered by the same type of process that blows out the fusion reaction in the laboratory. The clogging up is one of the stoppers that makes the current concept of nuclear fusion power production an unrealizable dream. The laboratory experiment also proves that the Empire Sun, as a gas sphere that supposedly is powered by hydrogen being fused into helium at its core, is inherently an impossible dream, as the heavy fusion product, which by its weight would remain in the core, would clog up the hydrogen fuel and extinguish the fusion reaction. The danger that the Empire Sun imposes on humanity as an impossible dream is that the dreaming clogs up the landscape of science and thereby prevents the recognition of the real nature of the sun and its variable quality by its dependence on external energy supplies that are presently diminishing towards such weak conditions that the Ice Age phase shift looms in the near future. If this clog in scientific recognition cannot be cleared, no preparation for the coming Ice Age will be made, as is presently the case, and doom awaits humanity. Fortunately, we may see the building of the floating infrastructures to begin soon, in spite of it all, because as the sun weakens towards the big Ice Age phase shift, the solar cosmic ray flux emitted by the sun will so dramatically increase that the resulting increased flooding and drought conditions, and possibly also earthquakes, will cause a movement to happen onto the sea in the form of floating infrastructures being built. It is inherently more efficient to escape epic-type flooding and droughts than it would be to prevent them. Infrastructures that are located afloat onto the seas are immune from flooding. Flooding is not possible there. Earthquakes have no effect there either. Droughts cannot happen there also, where fresh water supplies can be drawn from the oceans by deep ocean reverse osmosis desalination. And in order to make the full relocation of humanity into the tropics possible, that the now changing climate will soon inspire, the 6,000 new cities that are required for this will be built. They will be built with automated industrial processes so that they can be provided to one another for free as a critical investment by society into itself. All of this is possible. The materials exist, the technologies exist, the energy resources exist. The only element that does not exist at the present time is the willingness in society to get a process started that enables its future existence in the changing world before the onrushing Ice Age will actually be recognized. One of the chief blocking factors that prevents the Ice Age recognition at the present time, that blocks the fully focused preparations for it, is society's tenacious clinging to the Empire Sun, the hydrogen sun theory, of which nothing is real, which mirrors the nature of empire itself, where nothing is real either. Obviously, the breakout to sanity needs to begin soon, with a step away from the doctrinal dictates that presently smother the scientific recognition of humanity and assures society's doom thereby. The poster of the Empire Sun is that of an invariable sun, which by long schooling is reflected in people's clinging to the school-taught doctrine. Just as the victor in war writes the history books, so what is science and truth is written in the same manner. On the top-rated poster of the invariable sun, all climate changes are said to be necessarily man-made, and ice ages are said to be not possible except by long-term orbital variations over the span of thousands of years that are still far, far distant in the future, too distant for anyone to be concerned about. The orbital cycles theory, named the Milankovitch cycles theory, ironically is not physically a possible cause for the ice ages, for the simple fact that the solar energy received from the sun remains the same, regardless of cyclical variations of the tilt of the spin axis of the Earth and the eccentricity of its orbit around the sun. The Milankovitch cycles theory has been attached to the Empire Sun doctrine as a doctrine for the ice ages. It is so far off the track of discovered reality that Johannes Kepler had already disproved the theory in principle back in the 1600s, long before the empire-related theory was invented. The theory that has become a doctrine, like the man-made climate change doctrine, has no foundation to stand on. Both are evidently deployed for their obscuring characteristic that prevents the recognition of the Ice Age dynamics, and thereby prevents humanity from preparing its world for the near Ice Age transition in the 2050s. If this imposed obscurity by empire is not lifted and the Empire Sun is retained, which stands at the center of all that is false in climate science, the inevitable consequence will be the most radical depopulation of the planet that has ever occurred in the entire history of civilization. The astrophysical collapse is in progress. If the food production infrastructures that qualify for the Ice Age conditions are not created before the Ice Age starts, all but a few of humanity will starve to death. That's the significance of the Empire Sun poster. The resulting radical depopulation that the false poster sets the stage for would be the very effect that the masters of empire have long desired. According to their own saying, the current policy for human depopulation is to eliminate 6 billion people from the face of the planet as fast as possible. This has been announced many times. The man-made climate change doctrine is a part of the depopulation package, a package of mass genocide. In principle, mass genocide has been an inherent part of the policy of the system of empire for as long as empires of numerous types and names have disgraced the face of humanity from ancient times onward. While Napoleon wasn't aiming directly for genocide with his campaign, like the modern campaigns now do, such as with the biofuels hoax, Napoleon was nevertheless a high-minded imperialist who didn't care the least how many people would be killed for the expansion of the system of empire that he served. Neither did Adolf Hitler care any more in later times, and Stalin before him, when they blew the trumpet for genocide. And why should they have cared about human living and happiness when the masters of empire had trumpeted loud and clear from the late 1700s on that the world is woefully overpopulated and needs to be cleansed of its human pest, as they had repeatedly announced with a smile, and still do. Mass genocide isn't a crime in the circle of the high-minded who use people up like dumb animals in pursuing their political objectives. War thereby has never been a crime in their eyes, but an ideal, a way of doing business. The fundamental legality of war had been long established in the highest halls of empires, with numerous names. In modern time, this fundamental legality has been expanded to now include the legality to inflict genocide at will and depopulation as desired. And in very recent times, the further legality has been added to unleash a first strike nuclear war, unprovoked at will in the service of imperial objectives. In other words, the genocidal objective that started with the doctrine of the Empire's Son has become a monster in the modern world. Nevertheless, the overturning of this basic doctrine may serve as a good start towards the freedom of humanity and its having a future. Napoleon was a saint in comparison with modern society, in that he only killed 500,000 men in half a year, while the West, in modern time, kills 100 million people by starvation every single year with the biofuels hoax, without even raising an eyebrow. Napoleon didn't intend the tragedy that he caused to happen, that his war became, while we in our time do fully intend the vastly greater genocidal tragedies by policy, loosely termed depopulation. Napoleon wanted to build a land bridge to India. That's what he had aimed for. He just failed to realize that nothing is ever accomplished with war and the destruction of society. He failed to recognize the real goal that civilization depends on, which is the creative power of society's humanity. In contrast with Napoleon, who wanted to develop a land bridge to India, the Western Empire, in modern time, wages war in ever more places to prevent economic development worldwide from becoming possible. The modern goal of empire, which the entire imperial West is locked into, is no progress, no development, no industrial revolution. In the name of empire, the West hails fascism, depopulation, food burning, terror, and poverty instead. In comparison with our ideals in modern time, the mad dog Napoleon was a saint indeed. And to top off the account of modern madness, society actively closes its eyes to the onrushing near ice age, for which the fringe effects are already mounting up ever more. Napoleon's troops met their ice age, that almost none survived, just as modern society won't survive unless the logistics are in place that enable humanity to live and prosper in the coming ice age world. Napoleon wanted to build a land bridge to India. We in our time are in need to build a world bridge with Africa at its center and redevelopment Africa into the logistical hub of the world for its equatorial location, together with equatorial America. The habitable world is poised to be shrinking to the narrow band of the tropics. The process has already begun. The phase shift will happen in the 2050s or earlier. Will we be ready for it? No one can answer this question. One can only answer with certainty that nothing will be built if we don't get started. Our present commitment on this line is to close our eyes, remain asleep, and do nothing. Napoleon's soldiers would cry out to us from their icy grave if they could. They would be crying, "You fools, open your eyes. Your sleeping will kill you. Awake and live as human beings while you still have the chance." The chance rests on a principle, a great principle. The principle is divine love, reflected in universal love for one another, always has met and always will meet every human need. Unfortunately, there is little of this love reflected anymore in many of the once great nations. The stage is almost empty. Humanity's deemed value is near zero. In 1812, the soldiers did not wield their swords out of love for humanity, but to kill. By this intention, civilization is doomed, as the soldiers had experienced. The victory was on the side of those who had chosen to live. Their victory wasn't won until the next year. It may have been the frivolous waste of the 680,000 of Europe's most able men that were lost in Russia, and 300,000 of its finest horses, all in the pursuit of Napoleon's wild dream of expanding the empire all the way to India, that a coalition began to form against Napoleon and the system of empire that he personified. The coalition comprised Russia, Austria, Prussia, Sweden, Great Britain, Spain, Portugal, and some smaller German states. Miraculously, Napoleon managed to mobilize a new army against the alliance of about the size of the one he had wasted in Russia. However, the waste of the human potential that by then was history could not be undone. The fascism of the empire had changed the landscape against it. The flow of history was irreversibly turned against what empire stood for. The decisive battle that marked the end of the vast French Empire was centered on the city of Leipzig. The French Empire forces were already losing before the big battle happened. The French began to be routed in Spain and Portugal with the aid of the British on the 9th of October in 1813. The Battle of Leipzig in Germany started a week later. It became known as the Battle of the Nations. The battle was brought into the city. The position at Leipzig afforded major advantages to Napoleon's army and his battle strategy. Several rivers converged at and near the city. The rivers split the surrounding terrain into separate sectors. By holding the city of Leipzig and its nearby bridges, Napoleon could shift troops from one sector to another more rapidly than could the Allies against him. The Allies had difficulty moving large numbers of troops into Napoleon's sectors across the rivers. But the momentum was no longer on Napoleon's side. The die was cast against him, against empire. After 4 days of war, on October 19th, Napoleon ordered the retreat. The Allies eventually pursued him across the River Rhine. History records little of the details, of the struggles, hopes, sacrifices. It records only the number of dead. History also records that the vast French Empire existed no more after the smoke of battle blew away with the wind. The empire lost this day all of its territories east of the Rhine. Napoleon himself was forced to abdicate. He was exiled in 1814. The liberated people who had won their freedom from empire constructed a giant monument to commemorate the achievement. To judge by the size of the monument, they regarded their liberty a momentous achievement. As early as 1814, proposals were made to build a monument to commemorate the victory over empire. Construction began 84 years later in 1898. The work was completed in 15 years. It stands 299 feet tall. That's more than half as tall as the Great Giza Pyramid in Egypt. The Great Monument of Freedom from Empire is constructed in granite-faced concrete. Both concrete and granite have the quality of endurance. The monument's spacious interior, unlike the chambers of the pyramids, features gigantic sculptures of the humanity of the nations who fought for their freedom and won. The power that dissolves empire is the humanity of the human being. The monument is also known for the wide view that it offers to visitors. Perhaps this is symbolic because when society stands above empire, the view of its future unfolds with a near infinite horizon. In science, this is the horizon that opens up beyond the system of empire and the model of the empire sun. The very future of humanity depends on us gaining the freedom on this wider horizon in our time. The year 1812 marks the beginning of the end of the system of empire as a political structure. The year thereafter, 1813, marks a decisive step forward in Europe. Although the war against the system of empire had not yet been won at this time, nor has it been won to the present day. The system of empire still rules the world, politically, financially, militarily, and especially scientifically, with devastating effects. One day, however, and hopefully soon, the deadly poster of the empire sun may find its final resting place in future museum displays of a dark age in history. Till then, the poster of the empire's sun still rules, and humanity remains in an existential crisis, as it cannot see what remains hidden from it by its smallness in thinking. If this doesn't change soon, the rule of the false poster will destroy nearly the whole of humanity with the Ice Age phase shift that it then meets unprepared for the consequences. However, times are changing. The great principle, universal love, the principle that stands as the opposite of empire, remains standing, waiting to be picked off the ground and to be held high. And this too is happening to some degree already. Some strong movements have begun in this direction, led by China. If the G20 logo symbolizes solar plasma flow physics, it would indicate that China is well aware of the great challenge before it and before us all. Whether humanity succeeds on this front, working together across the world as one people, in love with our universal humanity, and builds itself the needed infrastructures in preparation for the next ice age, in order for us all to live and prosper therein and not perish, remains yet to be seen. If humanity fails to break away from the still widely accepted doom that it is exposed to under the white spider of empire and its false sun, then the coming ice age will find humanity unprepared for it, and will thereby be its final demise that it won't recover from for a very long time. This doom is prepared for under the banner of the Empire Sun. The time has come for humanity to take the trash out of the house so that it can live again and develop and have a future in a clean house. Proposals were made in the early 1814 to build a monument to commemorate the victory over empire, which the Leipzig Monument became. Its humanity still stands. Its aspirations for freedom still stands. Its vision still stands and continues to enrich the landscape. The victory that it commemorates was won in 4 decisive days in 1813. The building of the monument was the work thereafter of 15 years, paid for mostly by donations, so significant was the victory regarded in society. It was inaugurated in the presence of 100,000 people to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the event in 1913. It was built on the spot where Napoleon ordered the retreat of his army. It still stands today as a commemorative symbol after more than a century has passed. The Statue of Liberty in New York Harbor stands on the same eternal foundation of the quest for liberty from empire. It was dedicated 27 years before the Leipzig Monument was dedicated and stands roughly half as tall, but not insignificant. The copper statue was donated as a gift from the people of France to the people of the United States for the same type of celebration. The statue was designed by French sculptor Frédéric Auguste Bartholdi and built by Gustave Eiffel. The project was traced back to a 1865 conversation between Edward René Laboulaye, a staunch abolitionist, and Frédéric Bartholdi, a sculptor. In conversation, Laboulaye, a supporter of the Union in the American Civil War, is quoted to have said, "If a monument should rise in the United States as a memorial to their independence, I should think it only natural if it were built by united efforts, a common work of both our nations." The pedestal on which the statue stands was paid for by donations in the form of 120,000 individual contributions. This echoed its significance. It is said that with the abolition of slavery and the Union's victory in the Civil War in 1865, Laboulaye's hopes for freedom and democracy became reality in the United States, so that in honoring the achievement, Laboulaye proposed that a gift be built for the United States on behalf of France, perhaps secretly hoping that by calling attention to the achievements of the United States, the French people would be inspired to reach for their own freedom from a repressive monarchy, that of Napoleon III. The French monarchy was abolished in 1870 after Napoleon III was captured in one of his wars. Since then, the gaggle of empire institutions began to shrink. More and more monarchies were abolished. Fascist institutions rose and continued the system of empire under new colors, and were abolished too in turn. This does not mean that the end of empire was near at the time. Empire would continue, and so would its wars, even bigger wars, but the beginning of the end had begun. This beginning of the end of empire may have been recognized already in 1813, when a decisive step was made towards freedom and love. The opposite of empire is freedom and love. Wars will cease on this path. Wars are not instigated by love, neither are stealing, terror, and genocide. A sea change against these had begun by the once again rising tide of love. The healing is carried by universal love. The Statue of Liberty prefigures the inevitable recognition of the inherent dignity and unity of all mankind that remains standing tall for everyone to see and to aspire to. And so the quest continues for freedom in thinking and freedom in science. While the word Ice Age is no longer spoken, as it falls outside the framework of the politically correct, the truth still beckons. Just take me in, uplift yourselves, protect yourselves. We need a university-type approach here in order to bring the truth back into view, which false posters have hid for far too long. The very idea of protecting and developing humanity and its food resource by meeting the greatest challenge in human history that is now upon us is effectively slandered, so that it is almost deemed a crime to entertain the concepts of protection, industry, and development. The debilitation can end. The landscape can be changed. While the looming ice age cannot be avoided, the tragedy that much of humanity is rushing into by not preparing itself for it can be avoided. The door is still open, though its time frame is shrinking. The Ice Age challenge before us should be the banner headline in today's world. Instead, the subject is shunned, even in Russia and China, although the leaders there appear to have begun to orient themselves towards creating a future for their nation and for humanity. The masters of empire in control still call it a crime against empire for society to speak about protection, industry, and development, and is aiming to live abundantly. Under the shadow of their golden pumpkin that society adores, of which there are now many types, the heart of civilization has become so isolated and desecrated that empire has become a way of thinking, of small-minded thinking, the kind of thinking that Napoleon exemplified, in comparison with what society has the potential to be and may yet be. Thus the time for decision is at hand, a time for humanity to become human in the fullest sense. The time has come for society to rediscover its humanity as human beings. The critical success in this arena depends on whether humanity raises itself up sufficiently to reach for the one great principle that everything depends on in civilization, which is the principle of universal love, and raises this principle up high. I think this can be done. With this we can succeed. To succeed on this front is well within the range of what can be accomplished by a society of human beings. Like seeds are we, wind-blown, carriers of a secret still unknown, poems in the woods of nature, sentinels of an intelligence yet unseen, prophets of the enduring, apostles in an endless landscape. Harvest is seed time, thoughts ripening, carried as by a great wind, carriers of secrets to unfold, thoughts winged with purpose, a force waiting, silent, patiently waiting for the moment. Thoughts do awaken, aroused by the moist warmth of spring, cascades of colors, colors of life, bright yellows, bursts of silver white, thoughts becoming creations, monuments of genius, builders of worlds. Who owns the seeds? Do we? Who can fathom the wonder? Life flows from them in great rivers, rivers trailing into oceans. In them we are alone. Each one is alone. Each thought is sovereign. Beauty is its song. Thoughts are seeds becoming ideas, a life in discovering, a life in listening, a life in being touched by love, a life in loving, a life. Like seeds, thoughts fall to the ground, potentials are lost, hard grounds kill the precious, but we are men. Hard ground becomes tilled, watered, the precious is nurtured in loving. Love for one another, the human spring. Mankind is afloat in a sea that is love. Seeds germinate, become plants, roots break the ground, love lifts the barriers, patiently, silently waiting, reaching for the sky. Thoughts are the universe unfolding, landscapes of brilliance, ideas of power, substance for enriching one another, substance of the forever maturing, thoughts bearing new seeds within, seeds for splendors beyond dreams. Each harvest is seed time. A seed becomes a plant bearing new seeds. A thought unfolding bears up civilization. A spark in the heart bears the fire of life. New worlds are created in the fire of passion. We are the bearers of a fire that is light. Builders of worlds are we, new worlds which have never been, precious with riches grander than our own. Nature is love reflected in loving. Love paints the colors of its endless spring. Love paints us all, but who owns the seed? Who owns the cradle for the seed? Name it intelligence. Name it the universe. Thoughts are seeds from an infinite fountain, monuments of grandeur of good, fields of flowers dancing in the sunshine. All nature whispers this to us. The melody of nature, what a song! Whispers of a splendor grander than the heavens. Like seeds are we whisper too, seeds bearing gifts for the world, gifts wrapped up in sunshine. Gems are we unfolding a majestic song. Listen to the song, listen to the heart, listen to the silence where strands of love unfold. Listen to the symphony of our humanity. In this symphony we are one, one with the universe itself.